I think that it's hard to envision a beautiful future in the midst of a war.
The power of what could be if humans came together is so huge, could be so good. My whole life I've been longing, it's like this sickness inside for something good.
Nobody's going to say, no accident on the highway today, because that's not going to make the news. It's only the accident that's going to make the news.
One of the 50 most influential Jews in the world, and one of the 500 most influential people in Los Angeles.
We're not a race, because you can't convert to a race. We're not a religion, because you can't be born into a religion. We're a sort of religious family. And that's the reason that we don't have a good English word for it, is because Jews were formed before Western civilization. So there's no English to describe what we are. Tribe doesn't really describe it. But whatever it is we are, it is something different.
He debated, I think, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Steven Pinker about religion and its place in the world.
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
Welcome to the Jew Function. I'm Leo, this is Seth. We're very happy to have everyone with us for another exciting episode. But we have an exciting guest actually, someone who we tried to get a hold of for a few months, and we finally managed to pin him down, and he made some time for us. But before we start, Seth, I think it's been we kind of have been going on hyperdrive the last few talks. I thought it would be great if we just gave people a little just background into what is the Jew Function.
Yeah, refresh on what is it we're doing here.
Exactly. So I'd say, we always like to say that we're concerned citizens. We're not, although we talk a lot about history and historic patterns, we're not historians. We talk a lot about quotes from Jewish sages, but we're not rabbis. There is a rabbi here, but we do study the sources heavily. We talk about network science, although none of us is a network scientist, but we did do a lot of research on it. We read a lot, we spoke to a lot of people, and we kind of put the pieces together. And I have to say that it starts with the words of our sages, because these stretch back thousands of years. And when you actually take the time to look beyond the sort of the external stuff, the message, it keeps repeating. Anti-Semitism, or the hate of the nations, will rise when we fail to do our mission, and our mission has to do with unity. When we unite, something good happens. When we move away from that ideal of unity, when we turn our backs to it, when we marry out of it, when we just physically stop engaging with it, intellectually, let alone emotionally, right? When we stop living it, terrible things happen. And I think in the shows, in our first 22 episodes, we go through history, and we show, time after time how this whole thing happened. First
Babylon,
temple,
Rome, yeah.
Right, Babylon, Rome. First temple, Greeks. Second temple, Romans. The Middle Ages, a lot of stuff there. But
Persians.
That too. The Inquisition, the Spanish expulsion, all the way up to the Russian pogroms, the birth of Zionism, even the Holocaust, and lastly, and still very freshly, October 7th. All those big events were preceded by extreme Jewish disunity, stuff that we don't usually talk about, we don't usually learn about it in school, not in this way at least. And when you again, if it happened once, you'd say, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. But when it happens time after time after time, you start to ask yourself what's really happening. So historic patterns, then we turn to the sages, and we have a lot of quotes, and we read them. We read a lot of them. We even have quotes from non-Jews, anti-Semites, right? We read a lot of those that actually speak of a certain role Jews have to play in the world, and that they're not doing it. We have that as well. And then finally, in big data and network science have shown that something is happening in the human network, the network of humanity, that also places Jews in a unique role as what we call hubs. Not we, but as network people would call hubs among a lot of nodes. And that also puts a certain onus on us to function a certain way. And that's hence the Jew function. So, all right, Seth, did I miss anything out?
No, you didn't. I'm just, again, Lord, that we have the opportunity to be engaged in this. And I just want to say thanks. It's incredible to have a friend like you and a team like we have to actually be able to be having such a conversation and engaged in something so real and meaningful. As you were just going through it again, I couldn't think of anything more real to be engaged in.
And I want to say just one more thing that you usually bring up, and that is in the medicine to all these horrors is unity. And it's not just something that we invented, but you see it. It's what helped us come out of Egypt, and it's what eventually allowed us to receive the Torah around Mount Sinai. So even if you don't understand what is the Torah, or you do understand, it doesn't matter. The fact is that you had to be a certain way, be as one. And that's what we're trying to get to, and we're inviting people here to talk about it. And I'm very, very happy that we're I don't want to say graced. That's a kind of Christian word.
We are.
Blessed. What's that?
Okay, yeah, we were blessed.
Yeah,
Okay.
graced by the presence of a person who's he's been I just found out he was like one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world, and one of the 500 most influential people in Los Angeles, and he's the Max Webb Senior Rabbi of Sinai Temple, and he's got a whole bio behind him. I'm not going to be able to read all of it because my voice is out, but he appears everywhere, literally on every radio show, TV show. He's out there. He's speaking the good words. He debated, I think, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Steven Pinker about religion and its place in the world, and he wrote a lot of books, and he even recently, after the October 7th events and the fallout from those events around the world, he resigned from the Harvard advisory, anti-Semitism advisory. I may be saying the word exactly, off, but he will tell us. But again, we're happy to have him here with us to
Ruler of the generation.
Yeah, to talk straight about this matter. So please welcome Rabbi David Wolpe.
Rabbi.
Happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm good.
As good as one can get these days, right?
As good as one can get these days. Yeah, I'm actually now emeritus rabbi in Los Angeles. Since I'm at Harvard this year, and I do, other stuff, but I was in Los Angeles for a long time. At the moment, I'm actually in a hotel room in New York.
Right.
And on my way to Nashville, but that is a separate.
The Wandering Jew.
The Wandering Jew. That's right.
And what do you, if I may ask, are you up promoting something? Are you?
No. I'm speaking at Vanderbilt University. I do a lot of speaking around about all the issues that you're talking about. I'm not flogging a book. I'm just flogging Yiddishkeit.
Who's buying?
Right. That's the question. That's like the story of the Jew who wants to daven mincha, who wants to pray the afternoon prayer, and he's standing at Grand Central Station, and he doesn't want to be embarrassed, so he takes out his cell phone and he starts praying into the cell phone. And the question is, is someone on the other end of the line? Who's buying? So
I don't remember where the quote was exactly, but something around the disclosure of the book of Zohar at the, in the last generations. And it says, you'll be able to disclose it because nobody's going to want it. You'll be able to spread it in the street because
right.
Yeah.
So you, I think like everyone we've been talking to since the 7th, it's interesting because we've been doing this podcast in our own investigation, and I shouldn't say our own because we're not alone with it by all means, but it kind of feels like that sometimes because most of the people that we bring here, even definitely up until the 7th, at first, the first decade, you could say, around 2010, 11, when I started to kind of look into it, initially you couldn't say the word anti-Semitism to a Jew in New York. You'd be like, oh, don't say it. It's terrible. There's no such thing in America, but forget about it, right? Then as time went on, people started to kind of get glimpses of it, but it was always, oh, the crazies, the cuckoos, it's out there, it's not in here, that sort of thing. Little by little, people started to become aware that there is a problem. Definitely on college campuses, when you go there, you see this under the excuse of free speech, all kinds of terrible things are being said, and then people came on our show and they were willing to admit, yes, there is a problem, but most of the solutions or the approaches revolved around exposing it, right? Like let's expose that there is a problem. Expose the haters, shame the haters, sue, take them to court, do something like that. We have to, educate. We have to do like all kinds of things. And maybe until the 7th, you could say, well, maybe that's also something we need to do. But now that the 7th happened, and then the fallout around the world, the reaction, what was revealed as a result of that, it's like someone, right, like threw a pebble into a pond, and suddenly they see the crocodiles underneath, right? It looks so calm. That suddenly galvanized the Jews and like, oh shit, there's a problem and we don't really know what to do. We want something deeper. We want to find a solution. So you yourself, so this is a big preamble to a question that I want to ask you, because you yourself also admit that anti-Semitism is persistent, just like we say, right? It's been around forever. It's just changing garments. It's almost like people have a certain feeling and then they clothe it with different stories so they can keep on. That's sort of how we see it. We can disagree. So it's been going on, but there's always like a side that the Jews could take. And now we're at a time where you yourself said in a recent talk with Sam Harris, there's anti-Semitism on the right, there's one on the left, there's the Islamic world. It's really everywhere. There's no safe havens. There's no. So where do we go from here? I wonder, how do you see moving forward from where we are?
So obviously your question covers a lot of ground. I'll start with, I want to start with your history sort of the anti-Semitic sense of American Jews. My father was named Gerald Wolpe. He was a rabbi in Philadelphia for many years. And in his worldview, anti-Semitism was a constant concern. When I became a rabbi, there really was this sort of magical lull period. And I thought, okay, it was my father's concern, but it's not going to have to be mine. And the truth was, for a good 20 to 30 years, it was really subdued in American life. And then there was an explosion, in part, I think, first of all, because a lot of it exploded in American life in lots of different ways. There are people, you can say things in the public square that you never could say before. And I think it is not irrelevant. I just want to add this extra piece, that the students who are protesting on college campus spent their high school years locked up in a pandemic. So that also didn't help bring, those crocodiles that you mentioned to the fore. And I think what we're dealing with now is, well, I want to say two different kinds of anti-Semitism, but I'll say that it arises also in two different ways. That is, there are the anti-Semites, and then what we don't like to think of, but I think unfortunately is true, there are those who catch anti-Semitism. That is, it is possible to develop into an anti-Semite. We have this idea that, you're born an anti-Semite and you're always an anti-Semite and that's it. But you can actually start off not hating Jews and hear enough from your peers about, this is what they're like and this is what they do and this is what they're doing and look at that. And all of a sudden you start to see patterns that are a function of the fact that Jews are mentioned in many different contexts. And what do you know? You have an anti-Semite where there wasn't one before. And so I think partly anti-Semitism has genuinely grown. That is, people have actually become more anti-Semitic. And And that's particularly concerning because, as you said, we've been applying all the traditional formulas, and instead of anti-Semitism diminishing, it seems to be growing. And if I had, a one-stop shop solution to this, I would do it. But I think that it is important to recognize that the phenomenon of anti-Semitism is not ultimately in the hands of the Jews. It is ultimately in the hands of the anti-Semite. That is, you might think you can stop someone else from hating by just behaving this way or that way, but that's not true. People will make their own decisions, and so I think that the single best antidote, but response to anti-Semitism is just for Jews to be more Jewish. That is, if we don't lose the essence of what we are, I think that is a much better response than to try to bend ourselves out of shape, because if only we were this way or that way, the anti-Semite wouldn't hate us. Unfortunately, I don't think that's true. Anti-Semitism is a protean sort of hatred, and people can hate Jews for being everything. I mean, this is an old trope. They can hate Jews for being capitalists. They can hate them for being communists. They can hate them for being stateless. They can hate them for being, Israeli. They can. It is sad but true. It's a unique kind of malady in human history.
I want to ask something, to drill a little deeper into something you said, because it's true. We could argue if someone, starts off as completely not hating Jews and then acquires it, or if there's some sort of there's some seeds in us, just like there are seeds for many things. It's true that there are no seeds for racism in its classic form. This has been shown, and there are no seeds for a lot of other human behaviors. But at the same time, there are seeds for certain attitudes between people. And the seeds can remain dormant, or they can be awakened by the environment. And it's probably a tough experiment to hold. So we're not going to focus on that. But something else you said is you think the solution is not Jews changing anything about who they are, but about being more Jewish. And so I want to...
I say the solution. I said the response.
The response.
Big difference.
I think it actually is leading to a solution, by the way. But you will tell us your opinion. Right. I think the question is, and this is a question we ask everyone here who comes here, what is a Jew? What defines a Jew? We typically ask them to explain to an alien, to kind of remove,
Well, I have a slightly different response probably from some of your guests. I mean, halachically, we know what defines a Jew. You're born of a Jewish mother or you convert to Judaism. When I'm talking about becoming more Jewish, though, I mean participating in the full range of Jewish culture, which is religious, cultural, linguistic. Learning Hebrew seems to be an important part of participating in Jewish culture. So I don't want to put boundaries, the boundary of what I really mean is becoming more halachic. What I mean is becoming more fully a participant in the uniquely Jewish culture that we brought to the world. It's more than a pigel and a schmear, though.
Yeah, so that's I think the if we could find that bullseye right there, what is it that the Jewish people bring to the world? But what is that unique thing to be more Jewish, if there was something?
I know there are two categories. There are things we have brought to the world, like the idea of one God, which we no longer are the unique bringers of that idea, which is good. And then the things that we bring to the world are, I think, uniquely Jewish culture. And that's just like other cultures, ours is, the thing that makes us a little bit different is that we're not a race, because you can't convert to a race. We're not a religion, because you can't be born into a religion. We're a sort of religious family. And that's the reason that we don't have a good English word for it, is because Jews were formed before Western civilization. So there's no English to describe what we are. Tribe doesn't really describe it. But whatever it is we are, it is something different from the way people around us are. And this is where I would go back to I actually think that a lot of the roots of anti-Semitism, and by the way, of racism, even though there are many differences between the two, is a deep distrust of the other, which is in fact biologically programmed into human beings. And our difference, which is something we have always insisted on. You know, I feel like Jews actually were the original champions of diversity. Just nobody sees us that way, but we were, because we said, no, Canaanites, we will not be like you. No, Romans, we will not be like you. No, Babylonians, we will not be like you. On and on and on, Christians, Muslims, every group that assumed we would lose our distinctiveness. That distinctiveness as a people is both part of what provokes such ire on the part of the world, and the one thing that has preserved us.
At the same time, there's something really interesting about who we are in each of those places, right? So you have the Jews who didn't leave Egypt. You had the Jews who became Hellenized.
Yeah.
You had the Jews in the temple. I mean, even the guy who built the second temple had a special name that wasn't like a Jewish name, you know. So in each place, we have the Jews also doing this special dance, this kind of divinely orchestrated split. So on the one hand,
and we can understand it today, especially because there are people who want to leave being Jewish because it's hard to be Jewish.
I don't think anyone else is doing what we're doing, and yeah, and that's exactly it. Nobody can comprehend what we're talking about. Who would even say that anti-Semites have anything valuable to say without saying we're anti-Semitic or we're self-hating Jews? But there's something that everybody's missing in this whole picture, and the reason why the solution is so close is because we're not waiting for anyone else to change. We're not waiting for the laws to be enacted. We're not waiting for a new politician to get elected. The answer is way closer than everybody thinks.
Like us, hit the bell thing on the YouTube so you can get a notification when a new episode is up. Well, this is the Jew function, and let's get back to our guest.
Because it's hard to be Jewish. And unfortunately, it can be successful. We know that 1/10 of the Roman Empire was Jewish, and now
Armada.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, unfortunately, Jews can disappear.
Well, yeah, but what we also see is that we defy that statistic as well, meaning if you follow that line of thinking, you would imagine that within a few hundred years, that line would disappear like other lines of humanity. It's okay. Many nations.
Well, that's why I said that I didn't say, you said that there were two sides, but there will always be Jews who will disappear, and there will always be Jews who will not.
Precisely. There will always be Jews, meaning there's almost like somehow nature, you could say divine power or nature, that for us it's the same. They all maintain, they decree that Jews must remain part of the system. And that's why you can't even renounce your Jewishness, because when someone comes to kill us, they don't care what you think about your Jewishness. They care what they think about your Jewishness. All right. And 6 generations down. So you kind of stuck with it. And the thing is that you also say that Jews were the original group of that represented diversity, which is true. We also talk about it in our early podcasts. We formed out of representatives of all the nations that lived in Babylon during the times of Abraham. That was like people who gathered around him from all the different clans and tribes and big families and all that. That was Jews, this hodgepodge. And so we understand that, not only understand, we remind our viewers, our listeners all the time that Jews were a people of ideology. We were formed around an idea. Unlike other groups that are formed biologically, ethnically, racially, right? We're formed around an idea. And if you have a desire to be part of this idea, you're welcome. And once you do, you're kind of like stuck with it in a way. What we're trying to ask, I guess, is maybe there's something, because Jews, objectively speaking, and I'm not because I'm Jewish or Israeli, Jews have brought a lot of great stuff to the world. There's no question. The internet is full of it. People are waving it from. it doesn't seem to faze anyone. It's almost like it's not what we want. I'm verbalizing a feeling that you may disagree with. But my point is, a lot of people seem to not care about the good stuff that we brought. It's almost like we need to bring something else. And I want to kind of tie it to what you said about being more Jewish. And I want to try maybe in this conversation to try to circle around does it mean to be more Jewish in a way that's going to be meaningful to the rest of the world. We can't control them. We can't change their minds, act directly. You can explain to them why Jews are great and you should love them. It has to be a change of heart. What is it that we as Jews need to maybe rediscover, remember about ourselves and our origin maybe, that will do that?
So, first of all, you actually, when you were talking, you changed from everyone doesn't seem to care to a lot of people don't seem to care. And I think that's an important distinction. There are a lot of people who look at Jews and admire what we have accomplished. And we want to always, like hakarat hatov, acknowledging the good things that people think about you and do for you is, I always say Jews are very good at identifying their enemies. They're not so good at embracing their friends. And we have a lot of friends. And it's important to say that we are aware of that and acknowledge it and are grateful for it. And I do think that a Jewish community that is both in whatever way sincerely faithful to its tradition and takes moral and ethical life seriously because we believe that that's what God wants, that God cares more about how we treat one another even than how we treat God. That, after all, that's the great innovation of the Ten Commandments, is in ancient times, the gods only cared about how you treated them. And God all of a sudden cares about how we treat one another. I think a Jewish community that took moral lessons seriously and that had a fidelity to its own tradition could make a very powerful statement in the world, and has in the past, and could again in the future. But the attempt to get Jews to take Jewish ethics and morality seriously is not easy.
Can we refine it down to something for the young people? You're on college campuses, universities, right? Is there something that we can people? I have two teenagers. I don't see in their generation really that they're looking for a lot of, and we didn't grow up in a totally Jewish area where it's a very mixed area. I don't see that the young people really want to take on all the customs and all the things. What can the young generation take from what Judaism has to offer? What is in there that they could identify with, that they could clothe themselves in and have some hope towards a good future?
Well, hope towards good future or influence the people around them. They may not always be exactly the same thing. One of the things that I would say is that one thing that Judaism brings that America lacks is moral seriousness. That is, I remember years ago a story of a rabbi. He told this story. I thought it was a beautiful story. He was in a store with his daughter, and the guy behind the counter gave him too much change. So he said, "You gave me too much," and gave it back to him. And the guy said, "You're a good person." And he said, "Well, I try to be, but the reason I did that is because I'm a religious Jew." And I thought, that's like the kind of lesson that we actually believe, that we try to enact, but that we don't always articulate. That is, when people yell at students in vile ways on campus and Jews answer back in a thoughtful way, or when one of the deans tells me, which is what they did, we're not worried that the Jewish protests will get out of hand because that's not how the Jewish kids behave. I think that that's a really important thing for us to elevate that, because after all, the essence of our tradition is how to grow your soul and lead a life of goodness in all its different manifestations. Goodness towards yourself, towards others, towards the people who love you, towards God, towards the people outside your circle, just decency. And so I think that to frame those in Jewish terms really it does actually, it is an inspiring ideal. It's just that we don't usually talk that way to younger people, which is a loss.
What would make a young person be attracted towards that, or are they
It depends.
naturally
I
attracted
would
towards?
say, I think maybe naturally, but I would also ask them, what do you think the purpose of life is? That's a really good question to ask.
What do they answer when you ask them? What do they answer?
Different answers, different times. To be successful, to be happy, to
What do you answer?
I answer to grow in soul.
I guess the main thing is, like, if nobody's buying what we're offering, so we're kind of talking in in an echo chamber. And
Right.
so the question is, even if we have the best idea in the world, and we think we do, I mean, it's not our idea, this to be as one man with one heart, that nation won't live sword against nation, that God will be revealed, that he will be one in his name one, whatever that means to each one. It seems like the best possible thing, but there's this gap that we're up against. Moses was up against, everyone's up against all the time. Like, how do I brought you something great. And they're like, yeah, we're busy. It's like, so what is there an audience? Is there a vessel to receive this? Is there a fit vessel to receive what you're talking about? And if not, like we talked a few times, that if only 100 people died on October 7th, it wouldn't have moved the needle. If, maybe 150 would, there's like a certain threshold of pain where people are willing to listen. And that seems to also, that's what's really concerning Leo and I, like this through this whole project we're on here, is like, is there a way to do it without hitting the threshold of pain? Is there a way to run ahead instead of being beaten from behind?
So first of all, you said something that makes me, that gave me like a boost of optimism. When you said they didn't want to listen to Moses, I thought, yeah, this is an old story. They didn't want to listen to Moses. I should feel good.
You should.
Someone doesn't listen to me, like I could say, well, they didn't listen to Moses. How they didn't listen to me? I mean, there is something encouraging in the fact that we have a long history of not being listened to, and yet somehow there was a.
We're not called stiff-necked for no reason.
For nothing. We had there was a philosopher used to teach at Brandeis named Simon Rabinowitz, who wrote a wonderful essay called Israel, the Ever-Dying People. And in it, he quotes people in every generation who say, we're the last ones, there won't be any Jews after us. Yud Lamed Gordon, who was a Hebrew poet, said, nobody's going to speak Hebrew, so I'm writing Hebrew poetry for nothing. And now he never envisioned there would be millions of Hebrews. I don't know how many of them read Yud Lamed Gordon, but they could if they wanted to. So there is this systolic, diastolic movement in Jewish history. We get smaller. We become a tiny people. When you start to study Jewish texts, so sometimes you're reading Rashi or you're reading a commentator on the Talmud, and they say, Chule alma lo plige, which means the whole world doesn't disagree. And I remember thinking, like in rabbinical school, every time we would come across that, who's the whole world? The number of people that actually read Rashi in his time, maybe a million people. And he's saying the whole world doesn't disagree. So I think there is in some ways more cause for optimism in our age than in any previous Jewish age, going back to before the destruction of the Second Temple, because we have a state of Israel. I mean, can you imagine when we had, let me say it this way. At our 100th anniversary of the shul, we had Elie Wiesel come. And I don't remember at what point he said this, but at some point he said, when we were first liberated from the camps, he said, we had 3 goals. All of them seemed impossible to us. One was to have a state of Israel. Never thought it would happen. We wanted it to happen. It was hard to believe that it would. To free all the Jews in captivity, like millions behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. He said, we hoped, but we didn't know. And the third was to revitalize Judaism outside of the land of Israel as well. He said, the third we're still working on. And that's sort of how I feel, but like, how can a Jew be a pessimist when we've seen such miracles in the previous generations?
Oh, we have a few reasons why we could still be pessimists, but
true. No, but listen, Seth is a hopeless pessimist. I'm a hopeless optimist. We balance each other out.
Good.
That's why we're doing this together. But
if you're an optimist, by the way, I will just give you. So am I. I'm always hopeful, and I'll give you my image of it. I tell people that my character is like diving into the Dead Sea. I always come to the surface. I can't help it. I don't, even when I'm upset, somehow I always come to the surface. Anyway, go ahead.
The thing is that, again, if you want to get strict, and you're a rabbi, we could get a little strict with you. You talked about meaning of life. There is a purpose. You can read about it. To know the Lord your God, right? To know, meaning to get you. If you really want to follow this thread, to know means to have this intimate connection. This is not some blind faith, that there is a God. There's a connection that you can develop, and it lies in the connection between people, as you said, as yourself mentioned. That is something that we have. I have pages of sages talking about exactly that point. Mm-hmm. Starting from Rabbi Akiva, who says the greatest rule of the Torah is to love the other, right, as yourself, and you love yourself more than everyone else. So to love the other as yourself means to love the other more than yourself, right? So that all the way up to more recent times and the whole arvut, the mutual guarantee, we have pages and pages. So you'd think that this would be our number one priority, and as you said yourself, it hasn't been our top number one priority. In fact, in the last since we kind of got the land of Israel, I feel like in Israel we got a little complacent. It's like, okay, you can just be like everyone else. We can argue like everyone else, fight against each other like everyone else, try to be like everyone else in what we're doing, how we're doing it. And for the last year and a half, I saw what's happening here in Israel. People were not doing this mutual guarantee and love thing. They were doing everything but that. They were doing the opposite. They were trying to cancel each other out. Yeah. And so,
I mean, look,
you can answer. I mean, there was a question at the end.
I got back from Israel last week. I was in Israel the week before. What I found there was exactly that sense. We were complacent. We didn't realize like how awful the consequence of division could be, among many other things. Obviously, being in Israel was a powerful and a painful thing at this moment. And yet, the truth is that Jewish history is riven with division. You go back to the Hasidim in the Mignagdim, and you go back to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and on and look, I wrote a book about Melech David, about King David.
Yeah, I saw.
Obviously, his own children, his own son rebelled against him, and it's very hard to have a unified people. I think the issue is not so much that we have to be unified, but we have to have boundaries in our disagreement. And exactly. That's the key. And there, the Talmud is really like such a shining example of what it is that we, because the Talmud, every page is a controversy. I had my first Talmud teacher said when I was a kid, he was talking about himself. He said, when I was a kid in yeshiva, if you would fall asleep or you weren't paying attention or whatever, and the teacher would say, what's going on this page? All you had to do was say there's a machloket, which means there's a disagreement. He said, you were never wrong. You were never wrong.
That's how it started, right? Two people holding a tzitzit, right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So I think that this is something really powerful that we could learn from our tradition about how to disagree in a way that doesn't end with a final break.
So, for example, is it not a crazy idea to also look at all these texts that the mm-hmm. Jews study, not all of them, sadly, as you said, but and start by saying all these texts are happening inside a person. They're all inside of me. Two people holding the prayer shawl. It's my right. Two opinions, my two desires, right? Yeah. Fighting for who's gonna take over. A desire for myself, my an animalistic, egoistic desires, or a desire that's a higher one, that's aimed more at the other, and eventually maybe it's this creator quality that we're after. You can look at this entire book, all those books, as describing this
as an internal dialogue.
Exactly, it's inside a person.
Like the Zohar is supposed to be an internal dialogue in God. The same. I shouldn't quote Latin proverbs because I should only quote Yiddish ones, but there's a Latin proverb that says, change the names and the story is about you.
Right.
And I think it's true.
And what I'm getting at is clearly, most people, majority of normal people, can live with internal disagreements. It's what we do. But as soon as it comes out of us, we're not able to create a similar framework for living with disagreements. Like we come to an argument thinking one of us, it's a zero-sum argument. One of us should leave here walking, the other one should be dead. That's how an argument should end. Right. And what kept us as Jews alive was always that these arguments was for the Shem Shamayim, right? For the sake of a higher goal. What we're saying, Seth and I, is like, let's make this higher goal unity. Meaning you can argue as much as you want, as long as you don't break the unity. You can disagree, you can do whatever you want, you know.
So let me ask you a question. When you say, as long as you don't break the unity, what does that mean? Are there any opinions that Jews could hold where you would say, I'm not in unity with that Jew?
No, we shouldn't.
Well, hold on.
So
hold
if
on.
somebody's
Of
an
course, if you want to kill,
if somebody's an anti-Zionist,
oh no, that's something else. Anti-Zionist meaning you're against the state of Israel, meaning against.
So what I'm trying to say is that there always are, even to unity, there are boundaries.
Absolutely, but these boundaries should be
that's important. That's important to say. That's important.
No, absolutely. Yeah. But there should be. This is more almost like saying, "He who comes to kill you, kill him first," right? This is survival.
But it's not. But it's not.
Why not?
It is to you, but it's not to them.
So why don't we also then say,
good point.
Let's not try and eat the entire whale at first. Let's define this thing that we're talking about now, and because there is also this matter, like we see with Jews. What is it? A fraction of 1%, and look at the influence. So we understand we don't need to get 1 billion people at once. We need this kind of hubs and nodes thing that we also talk about, and the role of the Jews. We just need this group, this force to build. So we need to just find those who.
I think if you could create unity among all the Jews who support Israel and support Jewish life, however they define that, that is a mission that I'll sign. I will sign. Tell me.
All right, good. We have it on tape. We can end the show. Done.
Got him.
No, but listen, David, that's exactly what we're after. We're trying to start these circles, like rekindle that small kernel, just like Abraham did, right? Like who wants to, right? Mila Hashem Elai, right? Like who wants to reach that ideal? Come, join me. I'll teach you.
Again, I should have a good Jewish source for this, but the way that I've heard this expressed best was Margaret Mead, who said, "Never believe that a small group of people can change the world. In fact, that's the only thing that ever has." And so that's exactly right. Avraham had such a tiny circle. I want to say one more thing about Avraham, which is really, I think, very beautiful, and people don't usually notice. God says Lech Lecha, which is singular. Only you go, but he goes with Sarah, which means that she's a part of who he is. And that idea that we are a part of each other is also that we are the one body, basically, is a profound Jewish idea. And you can't, when October 7th happened, the entire Jewish world was attacked.
And I think that's something that people who are not Jews fail to understand. Like, a stranger won't understand it. It's like something that you cannot explain. You can you either feel it or you don't feel it. Right. And that's exactly it. It's a time. I think we moved from. We gave the cold logic. 300-400 years. It had a good run. Now it's time to start feeling a little bit and to really go with what we feel, because these feelings are really, really strong. And when you hear the stories that come out of it, and you hear the stories of people awakening in Israel, outside of Israel, when you hear this visceral reaction of reservists who go to fight, and they say, we're not coming back. I have a lot of friends who are there, and they say they're serving with people who don't want to leave. They don't want to take days off to go back, because they don't want to go back to the swamp where the media again is, and the billboards on the Ayalon Highway, and people are. It's like I'm in shock. I'm in shock that we have that. I'm not surprised, even though we have members of Knesset that are speaking against this land of Israel, the state of Israel. This is such a, but I accept it, because it's throughout of history always the worst enemy of the Jew was the Jew. There's no question. but because he's
We
making the
had some
whole.
we had some competition.
We had some competition, yeah, but it's really hard to beat a
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
a good knife in
yeah,
the back.
yeah.
It's and again, we're ready. We know we did our research. We know how it can go, but we also know that during those few times that we got together and really kind of stuck it, some unbelievable stuff happened. And if we talk about it, in fact, between the two temples, there's a few hundred years that there's very little history written about Jews, because they were, even though they were
Right.
already falling down from that level of love that they reached in the first temple, they still had a few hundred years of really good time together. It was amazing, but nobody writes about it because it's like there's nothing much to to say. But we want to revive that. We want to revive that idea.
Well, this is part of the problem. You've just put your finger on a piece that we all know, which is that that media, social media as well, is an algorithm that always moves towards conflict. Nobody's going to say, no accident on the highway today, because that's not going to make the news. It's only the accident that's going to make the news. And so there is a sort of outsized attention given to negative things, and that reinforces itself. And that's part of the challenge that we face.
Jew function is really it's a desperate attempt to change something about the rise in anti-Semitism that doesn't seem to go away, and looking at history usually ends with something terrible before we reach relative quiet again. But we don't want to reach something terrible. We want to do it now. So that's why we're doing this podcast. And if you like this, also consider leaving a small contribution on our Patreon channel. Right. We both have day jobs, by the way, so we're not hoping to make money from this. We're hoping to see some change of heart.
Any funds are used to get this out there, to get this to people. We consider this the same way you go out every day to get money to feed your family, put a roof over your head. This is also critically important to our future, to our safety, to a good world, not only for Jews, but for everyone.
Well, this is the Jew function, and let's get back to our guest. I think the question that I want to ask you is, excuse me, is what it kind of ties with what Seth asked you earlier. How can we make this idea of Jewish unity not seems like a good idea or a good moral choice or what, but really like our only solution, our only way out of this? That's the thing that I find is most.
My sense, I haven't given this as much thought as it probably deserves, but my sense is, just like you can't be happy by deciding to be happy, you can't be unified by deciding to be unified. The way that you're happy is by choosing a common mission together. And unity, as I see it, is by choosing a common mission together, as opposed to telling everybody, let's be unified. But if you tell everybody, let's all sing this song, all of a sudden everybody's unified. So the question is, what mission can the Jewish people together embark on that will help us feel like we have a common purpose in this world?
Great. So you're saying don't even say that unity is the solution. Just find a way to unite the Jews, and then they will feel the results of unity.
I think so. I think
And
that's
besides an attack. So then, what is this compelling way to do this? Because the attack works. We know it does.
Common enemies are very effective.
Very,
Yeah,
we've joked a lot of times here that like a really good alien attack
Yep.
would really unite the people.
Yes.
We joked about that like last year. We're like, we need a good, strong alien attack, and then we could get, everyone united. But it's a joke, kind of, but what way can we like, what is, I'm going to repeat the same question. And actually, Leo, my question was kind of the same as yours. Like, we are banging our heads here to figure out, and we also understand, and maybe this is where the answer is, we don't have the answer. Maybe the actual way that the answer comes is through this act of somehow getting us together. Something new is born, like in the act of making love, like something bigger than the man and the woman is born at a great concert. There's an energy there that really, when you're singing at the Shabbos table, there's something that's bigger than everybody. We need that God factor, that other factor to come in, because that's where the answer is really going to come from. From how do we create the I don't know, I'm not asking, I know it's a big question. How do we do it, Rabbi? But
yes, if any, right. But well, the one, I obviously don't have the answer other than the things that I've talked about, and it requires much more. I mean, but anyway, one of the things that I think it is a hopeful step towards that, which is a result of the attack, is that both in Israel and here, the people that I've spoken to feel a much closer connection to one another than I've ever seen since maybe '67. That is, Israel and American Jewry and world Jewry, not just American Jewry, they understand that their fates are bound up one in the other. That, this is, and I think that that's incredibly important and helpful moving forward. As long as we felt like, oh, we're here and they're there, and there's really no, but, and also Israelis now understand that what they do and how they live has a profound impact on Jews everywhere. And that's also a good thing. It's a good thing to be true, and it's a good thing to understand. So.
I heard from, there's a person here in Israel. He teaches all kinds of things, but he speaks very eloquently, and he said that when we got the land of Israel in '48, and we started, there was a war, immediately there was a war by all the Arab armies. That war never ended. And it was really like we've been fighting other battles within that war. There weren't other wars. There were battles within that war. And just like that first war was fought, a lot of it was fought, in the Yishuv among people. Also, the war that we are in right now is turning out to be something like that to some extent. The war meaning is within us and on us and all kinds of. It's not like some war and some battle on the other side of the border. It's really inside, and you can feel it. You can feel the kind of the feeling that it's not like, oh, Israel's going to war. It's on the other side of the Lebanese border or some operation. No, it's happening within almost. And he's saying this could be the final battle in that war that started in '48. Do you feel such? I know it's a dramatic thing, but
I mean. Look, if it was the final battle, because I believe that Jews will prevail, I think that would be a good thing, because it was final. That means there won't be another one. I don't know whether we're operating on the level of spirituality or political analysis, because those are two different levels. On the level of political analysis, I'm dubious, although I wish that were true. On a spiritual level, though, I completely identify with that insight that every external battle is also an internal battle. And if you don't think so, it's because you are not sufficiently, this may sound immodest or hubristic to say, but you're not sufficiently in touch with what's going on inside of you. Because believe me, it's that battle inside of you, whether you know it or not. So I think that is true. Whether this is final, that's way beyond my ken.
I mean, we could go more into the spiritual side of things, because we like to, and we do study that, and we definitely got used to seeing the world through that lens, just like this talk about everything happening inside of you. It is a it's not a sentiment. It's a feeling that it's growing stronger every day. And I think, as you said correctly, I think people who are in touch with what's going on inside of them, people who are more aware, more just sensitive, they have that. And you find a lot of those people among Jews. There's no question. You also find them, these people, among other nations, but oftentimes they may be traced to Jews, or you don't know, but it doesn't matter because there's like 10 lost tribes somewhere, right, multiplied everywhere. And
Well,
I'm not saying it to, I don't want to piss anyone off. It's like, oh, the Jew. I'm saying, I think it's the people who have that sensitivity, they have that responsibility toward the rest of the world. Because like if you're the one who feels more, or sees more, right? You have a responsibility to alerting the rest of the camp, as belligerent and infantile as that camp may be.
well,
And
any gift is a call to responsibility. If you're given a gift, by God, then you have to figure out, why do I have this gift, and how do I use it to serve the world? And that's certainly a profoundly Jewish idea that I was teaching last night. I was teaching tefillah. I was teaching prayer here in New York, and I quoted the Talmudic saying that anybody who eats a piece of fruit without making a blessing is a thief. Why? Because you got this gift, and what you owe for it is thanks to God who gave you that gift. And it's the same thing here. If you're given a gift, then you have to use it in a way that makes the world better, because that's why you were given the gift. And if the gift is an internal sensitivity and insight, that's a big one.
I think that we don't, when we think of what could be good, like okay, we win the war, or okay, like it happens. So then we imagine, I don't know, eternal bokeh, what do like eternal vacation, good bank account. But I don't think we that often like open that up a little bit and imagine really what could be. If there's that amazing movie about the mycelium on Netflix last year, something about it's not apparently, there's an incredible communication network between mycelium under the ground that they communicate between 10,000 miles to each other and communicate. And not only that, the whales all talk to each other, and everyone's fascinated. The whales are communicating, and the mushrooms are communicating. Imagine if the humans communicated. I mean, everyone knows like the. Well, maybe not everyone does know, but the power of the human emotion, the structure of I'm sure everyone has seen the pictures of different parts of the human body and different parts of the galaxy, the universe, and the power of what could be if humans came together is so huge, could be so good. It's Leo called me eternal pessimist before. It's true. But on the other side of that, I really do long for something. My whole life, I've been longing. It's like this sickness inside for something good. But to open up, we usually something good is just like, let me make it through the day. But really what we have to offer, what we're talking about, is something massive. Something completely out of this world. If what we're working towards really happens, the messianic era or whatever it is we're talking about, it's not just that we're going to get along on the street and they're not going to, protest our Jewish restaurants on the Upper East Side. That's not what or that we're not going to have this ridiculous situation in The Hague. We're talking about something revolutionary. And where is that story? I don't hear that story. I don't feel that story in what people are talking about.
I think that it's hard to envision a beautiful future in the midst of a war. But I think that after the war, that's the time to enunciate exactly those kinds of visions, which is now we have to think about rebuilding, rebuilding anew. How do we make
new highways, new parks, organic gardens, like new what?
I don't think you can separate the material and the spiritual, because we're material beings,
Okay.
Or if you like T.R. Desjardins' statements, we're spiritual beings having a material experience. But
Okay.
you have to do both. So I think, yes, that nature of community is in part dependent on the kinds of communities we have. Churchill said we shape our buildings and afterwards our buildings shape us. So the way we build our cities, that's got to change. The way we transport ourselves, that's got to change. The way we relate to one another, all these things are.
But maybe we can reverse the order. I'm sorry for cutting you up, but maybe we can reverse the order. Instead of shaping the building, and then the building
I don't-
shapes us. Let's
I think
shape
you
our
do both.
soul, and then it will
think
shape.
I think you do both simultaneously. I don't think one takes priority over the other. I think people change as their environment changes, as people change, as their environment changes. I really
True.
do. The feedback loop. It's a
No,
feedback loop.
there's no question that they're related. However, if you had to, and again,
Yeah.
as a rabbi,
If you want the impetus to be spiritual, I certainly don't have any problem with that. I think after the war, people will want to work simultaneously on lots of different fronts. Some will want to lead the spiritual charge. Some will want to lead the material charge.
So here, this is where I want to actually press that point, with your permission, because I feel like for too long we've been like, okay, we'll do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit, but you know human nature, and you end up doing a lot of this and very little of that. People go to, oh yeah, I'm just gonna daven and be done with them. I check mark here, and I'm asking, why not try to live up to that role, right? Be the priests of the world and all that. Maybe it's actually easier to focus on that, and you don't have to worry so much about the externality of things, the material part of
I
things.
mean, God will
We've
make it
done
rain
this.
when it's supposed to rain, and He'll bring this when it's supposed to do that, and He'll do all those things that He promised to do on all those pages if we just do the little part we're supposed to do.
I mean,
I really
the technology is there. Jews invented so many great things,
I
medication.
saw over the
technology.
weekend, Elon's got a robot that's going to even fold my clothes. So everything is done.
Yeah. Why not try a different approach for a change? That's I think what's uncomfortable to you in this? Tell me.
What's uncomfortable to me is, first of all, the assumption that people have never tried a different approach. There have been so many spiritual revolutions in Jewish history. Hasidism was a different approach.
True.
Talmud was a different approach. We have tried different approaches, and they've advanced us spiritually. I don't want to suggest for a minute that we stayed in the same level, and now all of a sudden we have to start anew. I see different people as having profoundly different interests and profoundly different passions and profoundly different drives. Not everyone is going to all of a sudden start a spiritual renewal. Those of us, like the people on this podcast, who are deeply involved in spiritual life, that is our task and our calling. But the guy who wants to invent an AI that will help people to get around who are disabled, that's going to be his spiritual call. I'm not a utopian. I'm a meliorist. I think things can get better gradually. I'm all on board with the spiritual revolution. But this idea that all of a sudden then people aren't going to want to make money in nefarious ways.
We're real.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
We're realists. No. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're realists. And we, by the way, Leo and I both 100% get that the Creator created the empty vessel, and there's no limit to
The Yetzer
human
Hara is
nature.
a real thing.
Yeah,
and we both
we're
make
not-
money
we're not
using
naive.
nefarious ways. It's okay.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay, I'm kidding.
Anyway,
Look, the
We're not
point is,
naive.
I know we have to wrap up, but I'll just say this, because I think this is an important point. Just like we at some point agreed that we don't need to start with everyone, even here, I don't think everyone needs to be in it. Again, it goes back to that shared goal that you talked about. Even as among the 12 tribes, you had the Levies, right? And they were without land and all that, and they were in charge of making that connection. So again, looking at that same microcosm and expanding it to the macrocosm, I do feel that there is a connection there. The reality is quite holographic in this way. And I do see Jews as these connectors. We talk about it a lot in some of our videos when we talk about network science and the Jews being hubs and kind of serving this purpose in humanity. So of course, I'm not talking down to the last Jew who's going to make something, but again, that shared goal. I really hope, I wonder if you can kind of end with that thought on, can we have a shared goal, a shared mission that will unite us, that is not a result of an attack?
Yes,
But-
I know exactly what the goal should be. The goal, we say it all the time, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to fix the world under God's sovereignty. That's the goal. I mean, it's the goal of the Jewish people. It has always been the goal of the Jewish people. We don't think it's easy, and we don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but we don't give up. I would say that probably the single most helpful piece of advice that I could give people every single day is to be a little kinder than their inclinations would lead them to be. That the world is really suffering from a lack of just Rahmanis, of compassion and kindness. So, and since the Talmud says that Jews are Rahmanim, B'nai Rahmanim, compassionate people and the children of compassionate people, it's more kindness, more compassion.
I'm buying.
Amen. So,
Thank you.
first of all, thank you for this, for joining us on this ride. It was like really so heartfelt, and I know you're a busy man, and I really do appreciate that you took the time to speak
Thank
to
you.
us. We're not the biggest influencers out there, but we hope to be one day. Because
But you might have the biggest influence.
yeah. Well, listen, we got one of the 50 influential
Hey.
Jews, so
Thank you.
like the Jew Functions, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications. We're trying to figure out the solution to anti-Semitism, the root cause of it and the solution to it. And I think we're doing it with every conversation, moving a step closer.